So first you can either select the preferences icon here next to the logo, or additionally you can select the Fleet Complete logo and select preferences and then select toolbar. And as you can see, it's gone from view. Now the choice is yours as to whether or not you keep the toolbar in view or access your options from the logo. Personally, I do like to keep it visible, so I'm going to put it back. Now another feature is the quick access toolbar, which I just briefly mentioned to you. To make the application quicker to use, we have made the quick access toolbar functional so that you can add in more shortcuts. So, for example, if reports is a section of the application that you will use on a regular basis, you can add this option to the quick access toolbar by clicking on the Fleet Complete logo, right-click on reports, and then choose to add the link to the quick access toolbar. So now you can see reports is in the quick access toolbar. Now, another way to maximize the page is to minimize the alerts panel from the right-hand side of the screen where I'm currently hovering. Now, the alerts panel provides notifications for any rules that are being triggered while logged in and monitoring your fleet in Fleet Complete. And as a notification occurs, a pop-up appears and it's stored in this panel. Now, you can remove the alerts panel from your view just by clicking on the push pin on the top right-hand corner, and the panel is now a retracted tab. Anytime you need to see your notifications, just hover your mouse over the tab and the alerts panel will reappear. And you can minimize any panel that has the push pin in exactly the same way. So as per our list of topics to cover, the first thing we will go over is the administration of the application. So this is where you create and customize user accounts for other people in the company who need access to Fleet Complete. Now, to access administration, select System from your toolbar or from your Fleet Complete logo, and then select Administration. And here you can see you have access to user accounts, security profiles, and branches. And we're going to start with user accounts. Now, you may have noticed once I selected this option, this new tab appears on my screen, making it easy for me to toggle from one page to another. So for example, if I need to go back to the welcome page, I just click on the welcome tab and I'm back on that page. Now back on the user accounts tab, we do recommend that you create an individual user account for each person needing access to Fleet Complete, as there are several options in the application that are user specific. There is also no limit to the number of accounts that you create. Now to add a new user, click on the Add button and then fill in the mandatory fields. They are marked with red asterisks. Now the name is the name of the employee, and this can be entered however you see fit. Next is the login, meaning how the user will gain access or log into the application. Third is the user's email address. Now, this is important. It's very important that you enter the user's email address correctly, because once you click on Save and Close, the system auto-generates an email to that address with the user's login name and password. Now note, if you ever forget your password, you can retrieve it by selecting the Forgot My Password on the login screen, and the system then sends you an email with a temporary password. Coming down to Security Profile, this field determines what level of access the user has to the application. Now, a new account only has one option, and that is Administrator, but other profiles can be created by the actual account administrator. And we will be looking more at profiles in greater detail in a moment, and I'll show you where you can decide the level of access for each new profile. But in addition to security profile, we can also associate the user with a system profile underneath the security profile. Now, the system profile is something that you may want to reserve for individuals in a management role, because it does affect the global entities of the application. For example, things such as reports, user accounts, and device data settings. Now, if the user is to receive alerts when logged into Fleet Complete, you must check this box here, Receive Alerts checkbox. This is for your rule notifications if any rules have been violated, and we will talk more about setting up rules a little later on. Now, for those of you who have Garmin integrated devices, you have the ability to communicate with your drivers via messaging. So if the user is also to have this ability, select Receive MDT Messages. And finally, if you need to prevent a user's access to the application, just select the Lock Account checkbox. This is helpful when, say for example, you know a user is going away on leave and you don't actually want to delete the account. Okay, so I'm going to close out of here. Now, I'm actually going to go into an existing user account to show you the Audit tab. So I'm going to select Administrator and then select Edit. And we're going to go to Audit. Okay. This tab shows you the changes that have been made to the opened screen, by whom, when, and what the change affected, what the old value was, and what the new value is. So as we can see here, the administrator changed the language from Canadian English to US English. So it's useful if you want to see what changes have been made to the system, by whom, and when. So earlier I mentioned security profiles, and I now want to show you that in a little bit more detail. So from the toolbar, again, select System, Administration, and then Security Profiles. Now, the Security Profile tab has been organized into two sections, the Security Profiles and the System Profiles. Now, in the list, you'll normally see just Administrator and System Administrators. These are the default for new accounts. Now, to add a security profile, click on Add Profile. Provide a name in the description field, such as the job role determining the level of access, for example, a dispatcher, someone in sales, or a manager. Then the Allowed Actions tab is which functions the users are or are not allowed to perform in the application. So for example, to allow a user to have full tracking capabilities, but say no access to create or modify rules, you're going to navigate to tracking and you're going to check this box off. But then you wouldn't select anything related to rules further down here. So just check off what you want that user to have access to. Then the last tab, the Hidden Asset Types tab. This is where we determine which asset types, such as groups of assets, the profile will hide from the user. So, for example, you have two dispatchers and each have different assets they need to see and manage. What you would do is organize the assets into two different types and then hide the types from the dispatchers who don't need to see them in their respective profiles. Obviously, if you make any necessary changes, you would save and close. Because this is just an example, I'm going to close out of here. So now we're going to look at system profiles. These profiles are not mandatory, but they do determine the access level to global entities, such as reports. So to create a new system profile, click on the Add System Profile button. Enter the description, select the Allowed Actions tab, and check off what you want this user to have access to. Now, do consider these options carefully when you are deciding what you want your users to have access to. As I said, these options are global and they affect all user accounts in Fleet Complete. So again, I can save and close. In this case, I'm just going to close out. Now, once you have your user account set up properly, you can then move on to configuration and putting the options in place that are specific to your company. Now, because there is some additional configuration that needs to be done before tracking any vehicles or getting any rule notifications are put in place, this ensures that you see information on the tracking screen and in the reports that relate to your business. Now, I know it may seem like there is a lot to set up initially, but once you're done, the system is pretty much self-sufficient and only needs the odd update depending on your ongoing needs. Now, to navigate to the configuration screen, click on System, Configuration, and then Fleet Configuration. You can see that this part of the application is also separated into sections. So on the bottom left-hand corner, we have Assets, Points of Interest, Resources, and Maintenance. Now, your resources are your drivers or your employees. Maintenance is a section that will not be addressed in our session today. It does take about 30 to 45 minutes on its own. It is used to help you schedule required services such as oil changes and annual inspections. If you would like additional information on this section, please do reach out to the training team and we can schedule a one-on-one training session, or you can also review the quick reference card and instructional video in the training section back on the welcome page. So we're going to start with assets. This is where you will find the list of all of your assets. Now, an asset can be a vehicle, a phone, or any other valuable that you have chosen to track. When you first log into the system, the description column will be the same as the device ID column. And that is the serial number of the GPS unit in the vehicle or the telephone number for the phone or tablet your driver is using. So the description needs to be changed to reflect how you actually refer to your vehicles or other assets. So, for example, truck 3 or phone 1. Now, to edit the details of an asset, you can either highlight an asset and select Edit, or if you need to add a new asset, you would come over to Add. So I'm going to take truck 3 and Edit. Now, from this window, there are a few tabs we will go through. Here on the General tab, there are several mandatory fields marked with a red asterisk, so make sure these fields are filled out properly before going forward. The description field is where you change the label name for your asset. The asset type field will by default be set to My Fleet, but as you can see here from our drop-down list, we already have created some other examples. Okay, so if you needed to, you could add other examples or you can select an existing one here. So to add a new type, you're just going to click the Add button, which I've just done, and you can add your description, select an icon, and then save and close. In this case, I'm just going to close. Now, a type can be used to differentiate between different vehicle types, such as a sedan or a pickup truck or a flatbed, or they can be job descriptions for your assets as well. So, say for example, you have vehicles for service technicians and others for site supervisors. You can group them separately, and they can be useful for reporting and sorting purposes because you get to choose map icons. You can identify each type differently on the map. Now, coming down to the device data settings, these are the frequency that the system records and transmits the location of the asset. Now, the default standard for our in-vehicle tracking is to record once every 2 minutes and transmit every 6 minutes. Now, for work schedule, the default is 24/7. By using work schedules, you can create reports that track data either inside or outside of work hours, as well as create custom schedules for individual assets. Now, these are very beneficial for tracking and when creating rules about when an asset is moving during restricted times. So I will show you shortly in this module just how to create a new one. Now, the related asset field is used to link one asset with another. So, for example, if you have, say, a fleet tracker in a truck and an asset tracker on a trailer, you can link these two together, and the information is useful for reporting purposes. Now, the resource crew field allows you to select or display the employee or the driver who is assigned to this asset. The run field allows you to assign a run label name to an asset. It is not plotting any positions on a map for a route. It's strictly for reporting purposes and displays the route name you create in configuration within its own column in any asset-related report. Now, the vehicle type field relates specifically to assets that are vehicles. The various information about the vehicle can be defined in the vehicle types subsection to the left, and we will be discussing this shortly. Now, coming down to enable MDT integration, this relates to Garmin integrated devices, and this topic is not covered in today's session because, like maintenance, it does take a bit of time to go through on its own. So I do invite those who are interested to know more just to please go through the self-learning materials in the training section. Coming over to the right-hand side in the vehicle information section. Now, some of this information may already be provided by the installer who installed the device, and none of these fields are mandatory, so you can update them later. However, the odometer field is important. When you first receive the application, you will need to ensure this field is up to date for your asset's odometer readings. Once you define that value correctly, the odometer will automatically update as the asset starts to move. Now, coming up to rule assignments, this identifies the rules that are currently applied to this asset. So alerts or email notifications will be triggered for any rules that are checked off. Similarly, anything not checked off does not apply to this asset, and no alerts or notifications will be generated. Coming over to the Sensors tab, this shows you all sensors that are installed as part of this device. If you add any additional sensors, such as door or temperature sensors, they will also be listed here. Moving on to the Advanced tab, this tab identifies some additional settings and features for the asset. And then the ECM tab, this allows you to set up the parameters that are used for calculating fuel economy if you are connected to the engine control module. So unless you've spoken with the vehicle's manufacturer and you know what information is to be entered here, we do not recommend changing any settings or values here, as this information works based on very specific algorithms. So if you do have any questions about how this can work for you, please do reach out to our technical support team and they will be really happy to help you. So I'm just going to plug my other computer in here because it's telling me my battery is low. Now, do note that these three tabs will be used mostly for troubleshooting purposes by our technical support team. So there will be rarely, if any, reason why you will be working in these tabs unless you are having technical issues. Now, moving on to asset types. We talked about creating asset types from within the asset screen on the general tab, but this asset type subsection is another place where you can create them ahead of time and manage them as well. Now, to create a new type, simply click on Add, enter a description, select a map icon, and then from the Asset Assignments tab, you can select the assets who belong or should be assigned to that type, and then click on Save and Close. In this case, I'm just going to close. Moving back to the left-hand side, we're going to look at vehicle types. This section is different from the asset type section above because it relates only to assets that are vehicles. It is an option that you can use to keep track of mileage or utilization costs per type of vehicle if you choose to. So to add a new vehicle type, click on Add, and then fill in the fields that you want to use. Now, if you do decide to use this feature, you can then go back to the asset screen and specify the type from the drop-down menu. Now, moving on to device data settings. As I mentioned to you previously, this section indicates how often we are taking the position of your assets and how often that information is being sent back to Fleet Complete. Also, as I noted previously, the standard for the MGS units are snapshots taken every 2 minutes with an update to Fleet Complete every 6. Now, for the AT1000 Asset Tracker, the default setting takes a snapshot once every 24 hours when stationary or not attached to a battery or power source. Now, the important thing to note is that when you click on Add and choose a device, You can create custom settings and assign them to your assets using the Asset Assignment tab. For the record setting, you can go as low as once every 30 seconds and then once a minute for the transmission settings. But do keep in mind that the more frequent the snapshots you take, the more data you are transmitting. So you will want to be mindful of the data allowances in your plans so that you're not incurring any unexpected overcharges. And if you do make any changes, once again, always save and close. Now moving on to work schedules. As mentioned previously, the default work schedule will be set to 24/7 for all our new accounts. Now you can keep it as it is, or you can create custom work schedules. Work schedules are useful for reporting purposes and when creating rules, so you can know about activity happening anytime during the work schedule or outside of the work schedule. Now know that the work schedule doesn't affect the functioning of the GPS tracker at all, and positions are still recorded even if outside of an asset's work schedule. Now to add a new schedule, click on Add, enter a description, and select the days and hours for the new schedule. Again, assign it to the appropriate assets or resources through their respective tabs. And then the departure and return grace fields are used mainly for assets that are taken home by their drivers, and you don't want the travel time from work to home to be reflected in any reports. Now moving on to runs. This section allows you to create a run label name for reporting purposes. It's useful for reporting purposes to know which asset was working whichever run or route for a period of time. Now coming down to the rules section, rules are a very important part of configuration. This is where you decide what asset behavior you want to monitor, what the thresholds are, and how you want to be notified when rules are triggered. Now you'll notice when you open Fleet Complete that there are some rules that have already been predefined for you as defaults, so you can continue to use and modify these rules, but you cannot delete them. They were actually created for you as a courtesy. Now, to create a new rule, click on Add, and here you can see the list of all available rules. Now, for this example, we will use the idling rule, referring to assets which are idling. Now, the mechanics of creating rules are pretty much the same for all rules, but it is the specifics that will differ depending on the rule you are working with. So the details of the rules section, this answers the what. What do I want to know? In the description field, give the rule a name so that when you are being notified, you know which rule has been triggered. Okay, with the triggered section, the idling rule can be set to trigger after X amount of minutes or immediately. Okay. So you probably want to set that after a certain amount of minutes if it's idling. Okay. Next we have the repeated option, and you will continue to be notified until the asset starts moving again. So you can select how often you want these notifications to come in. The restriction section is the when and where. So when does the above detail information need to happen, and where must the asset be for this rule to be triggered? So work schedule enforcement, we did talk about work schedules a couple of minutes ago, and here is another place where these are taken into account. Now, you can monitor assets during, outside, or anytime. So during working hours, outside of working hours, or anytime. So it's up to you when you want to monitor. Moving on to points of interest, you can set points of interest if you want this rule to only trigger in certain points of interest, I'm going to skip this field for now. And then if you come down to assign the rule by default, this is actually a great time-saving tool for you. If new assets are added to the fleet, whether it be tomorrow or a year from now, the system automatically applies the rule to new assets and you don't need to remember to do so. Now coming over to the right-hand side, the initial notifications section, this answers the how. How do we get notified? And we have a few options here. So alert users are pop-up notifications that I mentioned when we were going through the navigation. It's your alerts panel on the right-hand side. And notice that when we select alert users, you will see at the bottom right-hand corner, we also have the option to play a sound when receiving the alert. Then the email resource crew is if you want to have an email generated to your resources. Therefore, whichever resource is assigned to the asset at the time the rule is triggered will receive the notification. Next, for any users we've added to access the application, they will be listed in the email users section. And this is again another reason why entering email addresses correctly is very important when you're adding new users. And then finally, if there are any other individuals who need to be notified but don't have a user account, you can select email recipients and enter the email addresses manually. Just remember to separate multiple addresses with a semicolon. Now do note if a rule has a repeated trigger defined, then the repeated notification section will be active and this will populate your preferences the same as in the initial section. Now, for the email notifications, we can also specify what information to include via the Email Options tab. Here. Options have already been selected as a default, but they can be changed if necessary to suit your needs. So now that we've set up the parameters for the rule, then ask the who question. Who are we monitoring with this rule? So on the Asset Assignments tab, select the assets that will be monitored. And again, if assets are not selected, the rule does not apply to them. So let's go back to our list of rules, just to highlight a few more. We have 3 different rules that are speed specific. We have the racing rule, and this will trigger when the assets are doing an excessive speed over the posted speed limit. Now this rule has been set as a default rule. We have the speed rule, which monitors when vehicles are traveling at a particular speed and above, regardless of the posted speed limit. And thirdly, we have the speed limit rule. This monitors when an asset is traveling over the posted speed limit by a defined amount. And again, this rule has also been set as a default rule. Now, within the speed limit rule, not only can you specify the unit of measure in kilometers or miles over the speed limit, but you can also choose percentage over the limit as well. That is to say that we now want to know when an asset has exceeded 15% of the road's posted speed limit. So back to our list of rules. If you are going to use work schedules, you may want to take advantage of the outside working hours usage rule. This notifies you anytime an asset is being used during restricted times. Now this is beneficial both for monitoring your staff as well as if an asset were to be stolen. Now, one thing to note with this rule is that it is ignition based, so if an asset is being towed, the rule won't trigger. In this case, you will see the code rule, and this triggers if there is movement without ignition. Now, you'll see that the code rule is also one of the default rules, and we recommend setting both an alert and an email notification for this rule. And then another very useful rule is the distance rule, which monitors movement of an asset after a certain distance, regardless of ignition state. Now, this is actually a great time to introduce you to the help section. For more information about rules or any other part of the Fleet Complete application, you can refer to the help section, which you can access from the logo or from your quick access toolbar. So just select help. Then click on your menu icon and you can search for, in this case, rules, about, and you'll see my list of rules and an explanation for each there. Now coming back to configuration, you'll see canned messages and replies. These last two subsections relate to Garmin devices and messaging. Now this topic is not covered in today's session, but again, just you can review the Garmin quick reference card and instructional video in the training section to know more. Now moving on to points of interest. These are areas or geofences on the map that are of value to you or that you want to set up notifications about when your assets are on site. So for example, clients or customers, vendors, suppliers, garages, places you know that they shouldn't be, such as coffee shops or hotels or gas stations. And the points of interest are reflected both in the map and in reporting. Now what you see on my screen is a list of all points of interest that have been created for this account, but a new account would not have any. Now you can import multiple POIs at once if needed, but there is some checking to do for each new POI just to make sure it covers the right area. Now instructions on importing POIs can be accessed through the help section as well as through our quick reference cards and instructional video. And I'll also show you how to create a POI directly from the map when I cover tracking. But you can also create new points of interest from here just by clicking on Add and searching using an address. So to create your new type, click on Add. Then you would enter your description. You can select a map icon. This is how you'll see it on the map. The line fill color is when you are creating your POI manually as opposed to using the buffer circle. And the line size is when creating POIs in a line. Okay. The smaller numbers, such as 1 to 4, are good for residential streets or paths, whereas the higher numbers, 5 to 10, are good for multi-lane highways. Once you've created your POI, you can then assign it to individual POIs to the type. Now, moving on to the resources section. Resources are your drivers or employees. These are the people we assign to or associate with an asset. Now, creating resources is simple. You just click on Add and fill in the mandatory fields. And again, any mandatory field will be marked with a red asterisk. Now, you'll see that 3 of the 4 mandatory fields are actually already filled out for you. So at the very minimum, you can just enter the name of the resource and click on Save and Close. You can then fill in any additional information you like. The level of detail is very much up to you. Now, the default resource type is resource, and like with assets and POIs, you can create other resource types to differentiate them. It's up to you to customize in the way that works best for you. You can create one from within this window just by using the quick plus button. And also, like assets and POIs, we do have a resource type subsection to the left here as well. Now, to create a new type, simply click on Add. Enter your description and select the resources to assign to the type using the Resource or Crew Assignments tab. And again, always save and close. Looking at the left-hand column again, crews, service groups, equipment, and resource certifications. I won't be covering the last 4 subsections today, but if you want to do a keyword search in the help section, that will give you any information you need here. And again, just to remind you, for maintenance, It won't be covered in today's session, but it just allows you to set up reminders for items such as inspections or oil changes, and it also allows you to keep track of repairs and the cost associated with maintaining your fleet. Now, we will gladly book a one-on-one session for anyone who wants to learn how to use it, but if you want to find out more, again, I would encourage you to review the maintenance quick reference card and watch the maintenance instructional video for all the information that you might need. So now we've completed configuration, we're going to move on to the tracking screen so that you can see how all of this comes together. Now, to access the tracking screen, you can get there a few ways. You can click on the truck icon from the toolbar, select the drop-down arrow, and then click on tracking. Or you can also click the Fleet Complete logo, select Fleet, and then tracking. So 2 ways to get to the tracking screen. Now, to the right, you will see the alerts panel, and it's retracted but still very much accessible. At the bottom, there is an activities panel, which is related to the resource tracker and Garmin mobile solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this as it is not being covered in today's session. In the center, you'll have your map, and this is available in Google Road View, in Satellite View, or in Street View. Just above the map are 2 search boxes. The one to the right allows you to search for addresses or mapping coordinates, while the left bar allows you to search for assets, resources, or POIs. Now, you will need a minimum of 3 characters to search. Now, to the far left of the screen, you have your map items panel. This displays your assets, your resources, your POIs, and your custom layers. Now, custom layers are map overlays that determine longitude and latitude of an area. Now, at the bottom is the general section. This indicates the information from the last snapshot taken for the asset you have selected. So I've selected truck 3, so the last snapshot for truck 3 can be seen here. Now, you also have mapping options in the top right-hand corner. So if we jump up here and select the tools icon, the first option to group offline assets together opens a new asset type in your map items panel to the left-hand side, and it groups them there. Once they are online, they will move out of this type and back under the type to which they were originally assigned. Now, an asset can be shown as offline for 3 reasons. 1, the device hasn't yet been installed. 2, the device is out of cellular range. Or 3, the device is not transmitting at all. Now, if you have any concerns as to why your devices are offline, you can reach out to our technical support team. Now, next, you will want to always ensure that Follow Selected Asset is checked off. So when you click on an asset to see where they are, you'll never be left looking at a blank map. Fleet Complete updates the asset's next positions for you. Next is Show Traffic information. This highlights your roads in colors based on the key or legend. It displays where traffic is moving quickly or slowly, as you can see. Next is Use Direction Icons for assets on map. This displays an icon for the engine state or direction the asset is traveling in, instead of the icon selected for the asset type. Next is Allow Icon Clustering. Now, this groups multiple assets or POI icons together as blue pushpins, instead of layering icons one on top of the other. And as you can see, it does keep your map clean and organized. Next is Hide POIs in Map Tree. This refers to your map items panel. As you can see to the left-hand side, everything is now hidden in its individual group. Okay? Or at least it should be. Here we go. Everything is now extended, and now it's hidden. So this does affect the left-hand panel when I check hide POIs in MapTree. It retracts and closes all of your branches. So it's just a good way of keeping your map clean, organized, and tidy. Next, you have units of measure, and this is if you want to have your tracking screen in metric for kilometers or imperial for miles. So currently we are in imperial, so we are in miles. Then you have display asset as. So you can choose whether you want to see your asset and the resource name in brackets in the map items panel here, or vice versa, you can have the resource and then the asset's name in brackets. And again, this refers back to the panel here. Now, looking above the map in the icon ribbon, these are the final options we'll go through for this screen. Now, you can also right-click on the asset in the map items panel. So we go here, let's say I want truck 3 and I right-click. Go. That's going to give me the same options as you see in the ribbon above. So it's up to you whether you want to use the ribbon for tracking or whether you want to right-click on your asset. Okay. Now you can also right-click on your asset in the map itself, and that will present you with the same options once again. So I'm actually going to right-click on my asset here. Zoom to will zoom in as close as possible on the asset you have selected. Follow in new window. This will open a new window to track this asset specifically. Now, the great thing about this option is that you can open multiple windows for multiple assets at the same time, so you can track everyone simultaneously. Next, we have asset activity. Now, this gives you a brief snapshot of the asset's activity for the current period today and the previous period yesterday. It describes the device data settings, the work schedule, start and end times for their day, as well as details such as when they first turned the ignition on and started moving. It also indicates how far they've traveled, the number of stops made and the number of trips completed. And just below you have individual activity details, and you can also display related address information if you choose, just by checkboxing show locations. Now to the right are 3 pie charts explaining how long the asset spent within these categories of speed, how long it's spent within various ignition states, and lastly, which rules have been triggered and how many times. Now, if you want information that goes back farther than today or yesterday, then you will use the activity report from the reports section, which we'll look at in just a few minutes. So next we have trip replay. A trip in Fleet Complete is defined as ignition on to ignition off with movement in between. So this screen on my screen currently describes the number of completed trips, and it outlines each one with the individual positions and then the snapshots on the map to the right. Now you can change the date range to see up to 1 year's worth of data, or you can go as far back as when your devices were installed if it has been less than 1 year. So you just change the dates and then click on load trips. Okay. So as you can see, my trip on August 17 at 6 a.m. to 7:59 p.m. These were all my trips, okay? So my first trip commenced at 5:41 a.m. The distance travelled was 34.8 miles and it lasted for 38 minutes. These are all the positions recorded for this trip. So this trip, again, commenced at 5:41 a.m. and finished at 6:19 a.m. with three, four, five, six, seven, eight rules violated. Okay, so as you can see, this is the end, and then this was the beginning. And if you click on any of these, it will refer back to the positions on the left-hand side. So that is trip replay. Now we have the breadcrumb trail next. So select breadcrumb trail. I'm actually going to make this screen a bit bigger just so it's easier for you to follow. So going back to the breadcrumb trail, this works very similarly to the trip replay, and it shows you snapshots taken for the asset. Now the difference is that instead of breaking it down into completed trips, it gives you all the details at once for the most recent 24 hours by default. Now as you can see, the screen is split in two. The bottom is the map with all snapshots plotted out, and the top is a position report. And you also have access to this through the reports section. Now, this may look like a lot of information, but don't feel overwhelmed by a breadcrumb report because you can work with it to suit your needs and for it to make more sense to you. So, for example, you're not going to need every single column here, okay? So what you can do is you can always remove certain columns. So the first thing I'm going to do is right-click on any column and select Best Fit All, just so I can see what every column is. So it just extends my columns so I can actually see what each of them represents. So let's go ahead and remove all of the kilometers per hour because we're working in imperial. So right-click again and hide this column. That's going to hide any column that I deem unnecessary. Okay, if you accidentally right-click on a column and hide it, and then you want it back, just again right-click and select Column Chooser, and that will show you any column that you've hidden. So say earlier on I hid Asset, and now I want to bring it back. I just bring it back and drop it, and there it is. Okay. As you just saw, I can move columns around, so I can drag them where I want them to go. I'm actually going to bring my province up next to date and time. And another very useful column which comes towards the end is the reason code column. So I'm actually going to move that one further up to the front, and I'll explain why once I get it to where I want it to go. Okay. So I like reason code column because it tells you why the snapshot was taken. So it's used to provide an explanation for a resource's status. So for example, the first snapshot was taken because it notified us that the ignition was turned on. First fix is the first satellite fix. So the first time that the device recognizes the satellite. So you'll always see a first fix. Generally, it will come after ignition on. Periodic relates back to your device data settings. So standard is 2 and 6. So snapshot taken every 2 minutes and transmitted back every 6. And if we come down to the end, under our reason code, we'll see ignition off. There will always be a snapshot for the ignition off. And then the park timer will always be the last snapshot before the device goes to sleep. So if your device settings are set at standard 2 and 6, the park timer will generally occur 12 minutes after ignition off. So that should be the last snapshot before the device goes to sleep. So I like to have reason code up towards the front. The great thing to remember is that once it has been configured, the breadcrumb trail will remember your settings, so you don't need to change it each time. This is user specific, so each individual user will need to configure their reports and their breadcrumb trail as they would like them. Okay, moving on to assign run. This allows you to assign a root name to an asset for reporting purposes, as long as you've already created the label name in configuration. If yes, then double click on the run name to assign it to the asset. Next is assign resource or crew. This allows you to assign a resource from the list as long as you have set them up on the configuration side, and it will also appear in your reports in its own column. Next is locate closest asset, and you can also access this just by clicking on the map as well. This will show you which assets are closest to the one you've selected. Okay, you can also use this option, as I said, within the map. Now, if you have to send an asset to another address, you can use the search bar for the address if you wish, and then right-click on the point in the map and again select Locate Closest Asset, and that will also tell you which assets are closest to this location on the map. Next is Get Position. Now, this is also used for reporting purposes. It allows you to request an additional snapshot, which you can then view from the breadcrumb trail or in the position report in the reports section of Fleet Complete. This option does not update your map, okay? It is for adding an additional snapshot to the breadcrumb trail and position report. Next is Edit the Asset. And this will open a shortcut to the configuration screen, which we looked at earlier, where you can update or change the information related to your asset. Now, we will, in a moment, come back to add POI here. But before we move on to this point, I want to jump down to the departure notification. Now, this is used as a temporary POI, temporary point of interest. It's to know when the asset leaves its current location. So it puts a red boundary circle, as you can see currently on my screen, around the asset. And once the boundary is crossed, an email notice is sent to the user who made the request. So this is user specific. It's also a one-time request. So once the email has been sent, Fleet Complete turns the notification off automatically. Now, if you want to turn this off manually, reselect the icon from your icon ribbon up here above your map, or you can also select it on the by right-clicking on the asset here. Now, if you feel that the departure notification radius, so if you feel that it's too large, if you need to shrink it, this is done via the branch information. So if you want to shrink that size, just select System, Administration, and then Branches. Go, and you'll see departure notification radius. You can always shrink the size here, or you can increase it as well if necessary. And then save and close. So back to the tracking screen. We're going to now look at Add POI here. Now, this option creates a POI based on the current location of the asset. It opens the shortcut screen to the configuration side, which we did look at earlier. Now, the other option is to create a POI directly from the tracking screen. So you can search for an address using your location search bar, so just above the map, or you can right-click on a location and select Add POI here to open the same configuration screen. Now, when you are adding a POI, you add a description, how you'll refer to the POI. Second, you can change the type, so on the right-hand side if necessary. Okay, or you can create a new type just by clicking on the plus sign. Then change the map to satellite view so that you can see the area you're working with just a little bit clearer if you haven't done so already. Now, if the surface area of the default buffer circle does not cover everything or everywhere the assets will park or when they're on site, you can increase the buffer size again using your keyboard. This time we're going to come down to buffer and increase it. And that will increase the size for you. Now, should you need to be more specific with the area being covered, or say you have multiple POIs very close to one another, the buffer circle shape may not be the most effective option for you. So you can erase this circle just by clicking on erase, and you can actually draw the area. Just click on area, and you can draw the POI. And just before you go to close it, don't close it completely, just double click. And Fleet Complete will actually close the shape for you. So it's similar to connect the dots. Then the line option is for drawing POIs along roads and highways, and draw the line the same way as using the area option. Now in the Details tab, you can add contact information such as a name, telephone number, or email address. This gives you the added benefit of notifying clients or customers of your assets' arrivals and departures. Now this option is to be used to notify those who do not have access to Fleet Complete, as the email notifications do not specify which assets arrive or depart from the location. If the contact needs to know specifically which assets are arriving or are departing, you will include their email addresses in the POI rule, as we've already discussed. Now, the email option is also a great feature that ties in with the client or customer's hours of operation, so the contact only receives notifications about departures and notifications and arrivals, during these hours. And if you have stipulations as to when a POI can be visited, those hours can be entered. You can confirm if the assets have been here during restricted times using a curfew report. So that's pretty much what you need to know about the tracking screen. Last but certainly not least, we are going to move on to the reports module. So to access reports, you can click on the reports icon from your toolbar, and then on the arrow, and then select Operations. You can also access it via the Fleet Complete logo. Now, reports give you a detailed view of all Fleet Complete data. It's captured from the GPS, sensors, rules being triggered, or interactions with POIs, and it can be used for a wide variety of purposes that offer your organization additional value. So, how your devices are reporting, and if there are any connectivity problems. Now, to select a specific report to run, click on Report, Fleet, and then choose the report you want. Now, there are several operations reports available in the system by default, and customized reports can also be obtained from Fleet Complete as required. Now, to learn what each report offers, do use the Help section, as we previously discussed. Now, to generate a report, select the report you want to run. I'm going to select Activity Report. The report parameters on the left define what you want to know, which assets you want to know about, how far back in time you want to see, and whether or not it's inside or outside of working hours, or indeed any time. Now, to select all the assets, select the top asset and drag your mouse down. To select only a few assets, just click on the assets, and then for any additionals, just click on Control and then your mouse as well. Okay. Once you've set your report parameters, just click on Get Data, And the report information looks similar to what we previously looked at with the breadcrumb trail. Again, like with the breadcrumb trail, our reports are customizable and the system remembers your layout preferences. So we can remove columns just by right-clicking and selecting hide this column. Or in addition here as well, you can also just drag your column down, look for the big X and release. And to retrieve any columns, you can right-click and select column chooser, and that will show you any columns you've hidden if you accidentally hid anything. Beyond the layout of the columns, you also have the option of sorting your report by dragging one or more column headers into the white space directly above. So I just added my asset, so that has now sorted my report for me based on the asset. You can also request sums and counts, much like in Microsoft Excel. So in the white space between your assets, just right-click and you can select if you would like a sum or count. For a sum or count for the entire fleet, just right-click in the white space at the very bottom of the page. And you can also filter out data by clicking on the filter key just in the top right-hand corner. Select what info you want to filter by. And then if you need to clear your filter, just click on the X on the bottom left-hand corner. Now, a new feature in Fleet Complete is that you have the option to send a copy of this email on an ad hoc basis to one or multiple recipients from within the operations side of reporting without having to schedule it. So once you've configured the report layout, how you would like to see or present it going forward, what you can do is select the checkbox for Do Not Show Report, bottom left-hand corner, and the email report to a list of users or email addresses, and that will send the report to you via email. Now, this does not show the report in the layout section, but rather opens this confirmation dialog window. Choose the users in Fleet Complete who are to receive a copy of this report, or you can also type in addresses manually if necessary. Choose the report format. We do recommend Excel. It lets you continue working with columns, cells, data, and reports such as PDFs only allow you an image of the report. So it's probably better to choose Excel here, unless it's for legal reasons, and then go down the route of PDF. Once you've defined who will receive the report, just click on Continue at the top of the window, and the dialog window will disappear and the report is sent to the designated recipients. If you want to have reports sent to you automatically via email, you have the option of setting up report schedules for Fleet Complete to do this for you. Now, to set up a new schedule, click on the Reports drop-down arrow and select Report Schedules. To set up a new schedule, click on Add. Fleet, and then select the report for which you want to run. Again, fill out the parameters on the left, the same as we did on the operations side of the module, and to the right-hand side, you will define the schedule itself. Okay. So the description is the name of the report as it will appear in the subject line of the email you send out. Recipient emails is the email address for who should receive copies of the report. Again, multiple addresses separated with a semicolon. The report period is how much data you'll include in the report. So you can include data from the current day as far back as the previous full month. The runtime is set automatically to the time zone based on the user account, but it can be changed. So if 3 a.m. is not ideal for you, which I imagine isn't ideal for everyone, you can always change that. The language is the language in which you will receive the report. The frequency is how often you want to receive it. You can receive reports every day for up to once a week. Again, the export format, we do recommend Excel, and our reports do work very much like Excel. Editable by creator only allows the person who created the schedule to change the details. And suspended allows you to postpone sending a scheduled report for an indefinite period of time. So let's say you're away on vacation and don't want to receive this report while away. You can use this option to stop the emails without having to delete the entire schedule. Now, even though we've defined the schedule, the report layout is going to be blank. That is because what we need to do is we need to click on Save and Close for it to appear in the list and generate any available data based on the scheduled details. So I'm going to come out of here and select an existing report. And there you'll see the layout. Now the details of the report are available and the layout can be configured in the same way as we previously did in other examples. Once you're happy, just click on Save and Close and the report is ready to be sent on the next scheduled date and time. If you want to run the report early or ahead of time, you can do so just by clicking on Run Now, and that will allow you to send it earlier, and you should receive it within a 5-minute period. One report we do recommend scheduling on a daily or weekly basis is the non-transmit report. This records when devices went offline. This means they either went to sleep or they were offline for other reasons. Now, if you do notice any devices that were offline you cannot account for, just reach out to our technical support team and they will help you troubleshoot this.